friends. This is Reflections, a program that's sponsored by Paducah Cooperative Ministry, where together we do God's work with human hands. I'm Pastor Karen Winkel, and I serve United Church of Paducah. And my friend and co-host and inspiration is Gregory Waldrop, who pastors at Fountain Avenue United Methodist. Good to see you.
Good to be right here with you.
Very good.
I'm glad you all are here with us. As always, every month we have a Bible study, and today we're continuing that tradition. And one of our guests for the occasion is the pastor at Trinity United Methodist Church, Don Carver. Welcome, Don.
Thank you. It is great to be with you today, and thank you for the invitation.
Hey, tell us a little bit about yourself and what's going on at Trinity that we can catch up with.
I've been at Trinity for 2 years. A lot of great things are happening. We are now in the process of initiating some new ministries out into the community. We are looking to offer a Celebrate Recovery ministry. We are starting a ministry in the McCracken County Jail. Actually starts this evening. And another great event that we will be hosting in May of this year is the simulcast event with John Maxwell, May the 11th, 2007. So call the office and get your ticket.
Hey, sounds great. And what about you, Don? Where are you from? How do you get to Paducah?
I'm originally from Corydon, Indiana, first state capital in the latter 1800s. Started out in Corydon, been many places. And actually transitioned to Paducah from Ohio. I was in Ohio at Ashland Theological Seminary, moved back to the Kentucky area, and moved to Paducah Trinity United Methodist Church in 2005 of June.
Great. Well, let's get going with our Bible study. We're making our way through the Gospel of John, and today's passage is from the 5th chapter.
This is the 5th chapter, the first 10 verses, and I'm going to do my best here. I got myself a new little traveling Bible, but the print's kind of small, so here we go. After this, there was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there is a pool, called in Hebrew Bethzatha, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there for a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk. Now that day was a Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been cured, "It is the Sabbath. It is not unlawful for you to carry your mat."
Word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
What do we hear in that? What strikes us?
It's interesting, the feast. One of the things that stands out for me, the particular feast here, some sources say they believe it was possibly the Passover Feast. And actually, in another source said it alluded to possibly even it was at the Tabernacle Feast, and it was more in relationship to creation. And
the harvest.
Exactly, the harvest. And as far as in relationship to, it's interesting that Jesus has chosen to do this miracle on that specific day also is pretty significant here. It seems that John is focusing and emphasizing a specific time and day that Jesus has chosen to do this miracle. And instead of Jesus going directly to the temple, we find him going to what I want to call this pool of hope, because it seems like all of these people there are really seeking hope because of their situation, and the particular person in this story has been in that situation for 38 years.
Yeah. John is the gospel where we get the idea that Jesus was around for 3 years. Nobody else does the chronology in the same way that John does it. Gives us 3 Passovers to help us imagine it being 3 years. I hadn't thought about the fact that this was the Sabbath and Jesus wasn't where you would have expected him, but instead at this sort of pool, this place where I don't know if it was a para-temple kind of an operation, but it was, like you say, a place where people went, a place that had tradition behind it about hope and healing. Very interesting. I hadn't thought about that myself.
Well, and I think about all the people who must have been there on that day, and how as those folks are seeking hope, there is that flip side to that, which is all the questions that are present around that pool, either on the part of those who are there seeking some restoration themselves, or those who are there with them, who might have been with that fellow who has been suffering for all those years, and what for me, what a powerful thing that Jesus keeps going toward those places that have such depth of suffering and such depth of pain.
Right.
It is not our inclination as human beings, I don't think, to go toward the heart of those places. We might, skirt the periphery and then move on. And that for me is part of what makes Jesus such a compelling figure, so much the love of God, who can go right to the heart of it, because how would you even begin to speak to someone who has suffered like that for all those years?
Right. Very interesting. And I'm always interested that this person doesn't earn his way into Jesus' attention. We don't really know why Jesus comes up to this person. We don't know that 38 years was the norm or unnormal, abnormal. We just know that by the call and claim and will of God, this person is the person Jesus encounters. We sometimes make big deals out of all that. I know the whole issue of Cain and Abel's sacrifice is everybody makes all these kind of speculations about why one sacrifice was picked over the other, but the biblical answer is it's just God's way. It's God picked, God doing God's thing in unexplained and often unexplainable ways. This person gets selected, gets confronted. We don't hear of anybody that rejects Jesus's offer, or but we hear about this person who's been there 38 years.
But what a marvelous thing, because Jesus sees him and he doesn't presume anything.
Right.
He sees him and doesn't presume anything. He says, "Do you want to be made well?" And I love the gentleness and the freedom in that question, because sometimes we're not ready. Sometimes we're not ready for healing. Well, you think somebody who had been suffering for 38 years would instantly say yes. But, I don't know about you, but sometimes the struggle for me as a pastor is people are in a place of brokenness and they're in need of healing, but they're not ready yet.
Right.
They can't take it. Their answer really is not now.
Sure.
And I love the respect that's in that question. Do you want to be? You want to be made well?
And with that healing would inevitably come changes and habits and patterns of living. And I don't think you have to be sick to resist the idea of a changed patterns and behaviors and routines in your own life. I think in some ways Jesus was asking, do you really want to change? Do you want to be different? Do you want to undertake the kind of things that healing, forgiveness will bring in your life? And change is a difficult discipline, and I think he's acknowledging that here. And we all know in our own lives the difficulty to make the changes that are obvious sometimes. We also know the difficulty with, or we know people and circumstances in our own lives when we enjoy our poor health. We take good advantage of our poor health, and I think Jesus is acknowledging that sort of human reality, that sort of part of our existence.
Greg, you alluded to earlier there that there was really no revelation here why Jesus specifically addresses this person. And I think there is that mystery sometime in relationship to healing. You prayed for people, and Karen, you prayed for people, and there's been times there has been healing. There's been other times that there wasn't that instantaneous healing going on. So there is that mystery sometimes that we all would like to understand better, but that it is a mystery, and it is God's prerogative. And I always believe that what God does is always best. It's interesting to me in what both of you have already said about this individual, 38 years, and like Karen, you said, you would think somebody who has been in this situation for 38 years would definitely be ready and wanting this to happen in their life. And to me, it does raise the issue, and Greg, you were talking about even in our lives, health, whatever, where we have issues in our life. I really do think that we see there, and it goes to this whole ideal for me, our wills. For sure, God has given us all a will that we can make choices. We can say yes, we can say no. And that's a powerful thing. And it's interesting for me that Jesus here, when he does come here, and hopefully I'm not going way too far ahead here, but everyone at this pool, they're waiting for what? The water to be stirred. They're waiting, and then because when the water's stirred, they can jump into the pool or, and be healed. Well, it's interesting here that Jesus, the hope that he brings in here, he doesn't come to stir the water. To me, he's really drawing out this individual's will. As you said, the question Jesus asked, do you really want to be healed? I think it is something, in order to experience God's healing in our life, just because of the way God has created things, God, our will is very much a part of that healing, and we have to cooperate in that way in order to experience healing in our lives. God has reserved that power not to go against a person's will. If we really don't want something, then God has reserved that power.
He honors that. God almost self-limits to honor we, his creatures. Yeah, interesting. Push that even a little further in terms of willfulness. Obviously, sickness is as mysterious as is health. However, there's no question in my mind that in terms of out of all the folks I've gone and visited, by far the majority of them, their illness began in their as an issue of, for the most part, grief or forgiveness or lack thereof. That at least as I explore it deeper and deeper, I'm not saying that the illness is not real. I'm simply saying that it comes upon us out of issues of unresolved grief, unresolved sin and or forgiveness, and grief being the one that when I get to talk with people in depth, that grief keeps coming up more and more. You know, we do know all these scientific discoveries that say we have a propensity to this or that illness, but we still don't know why some people get it who have that propensity and some people don't. And I think some of that arises out of these kind of realities that in some ways we have, I don't say control over, but we contribute to or resist by our own lives. And I think that's an interesting part of the text, especially as you bringing it up.
And just to consider also for me, you know, our will's involved here. This person's will's involved. Jesus doesn't override that. Is asking this person, do you want to be healed? And I think also, Greg, a very important component in finding that wholeness for us. It could be a health issue. It could be other issues. But I think another component of this in finding wholeness is this thought of this person's been this way 38 years. Where does self-pity come into here possibly? I think that's a real barrier.
Temptation.
Yeah, it's a real barrier for us to find that healing and wholeness that God wants for us. And for this person, you know, it is a temptation. It's the easier road traveled to just have self-pity and not see any other options. And again, and I think it goes back to, you know, even that is a choice, right? It's even that's a choice. Again, back to the willpower. We have the ability, God's given us the power to be able to say yes or to say no.
And as you say that, I think too about how often when there's an affliction, it can be a physical affliction or an addiction or, you know, some limitation. It isn't just our own thinking about ourselves that goes into that, but how others think about us as well. Because I've seen on any number of occasions how a family or how a community keeps reinforcing that person's identity as limited in some way. And in a sermon a couple weeks ago, I said to my congregation, you know, Christianity isn't a me thing, it's a we thing. And Jesus isn't just healing this fellow. He's healing all the people that are part of that circle. You know, that fellow may have had a kernel of hope within himself all those years, and the burden could have really been, you know, what his mother said, or you know what his brother brought to that conversation as well. And that, you know, when I'm working with folks, I'm really aware of the influence of that larger circle, and certainly Jesus is speaking to that larger circle, even if the answer comes from that man himself.
Yeah. He oftentimes, Jesus will say to people, go home. You know, they want to follow him. He says, no, you need to go back home and be a part of this health for the whole system there. Or as in another gospel, the 4 men who lower the the friends who lower the friend down through the roof. Jesus says, seeing the faith of the friends, the people that surround him, he heals him. I mean, I think you're making a very important point about how it all fits together, and health is a part of a whole system of looking at life and living out life, and I think that's great.
Well, before we run clean out of time,
Yeah.
let's look at together just at the very end here, the last few verses, because the man picks up his mat and goes, and then it says this was a Sabbath day, so the Jews said to the man who had been cured, it is the Sabbath. It's not unlawful for you to carry your mat. And when I read that in preparation for our conversation today, I thought, well, what else is that saying? And it's not unlawful to carry the mat, but what just happened is not okay. In the rules of the faith at that time, that's a big NO thing. And so indirectly, it's saying, that Jesus has just stepped outside the bounds of something, and I love it.
Turned some things upside down, and no, they didn't appreciate it very much, did they?
It is interesting that this particular incident really escalates this animosity toward Jesus. It really it really gets elevated here, and he's going to experience serious difficulty in his ministry from here forward, because they're really out to get him here because of this good thing, miracle, healing that Jesus brought to this individual. So he's in trouble now.
Well, what he's doing is he's addressing the illness of this system.
Exactly.
Which would say
Good point.
that God would look down upon any act of compassion or love, on the day that's set aside to turn toward God. There's something in that system that's sick, that doesn't understand that. So,
very interesting. So the story has this systemic kind of a healing component as well, or at least it points out the sickness of this of the system, and that systems can be sick is a pretty amazing insight, really, and that Jesus comes to heal systems as well as people is I think a powerful part of the undercurrent of that. That's for sure.
Excellent point, because it is more than just, as Karen, you alluded to, an individuality here. It's the bigger picture here, as you say, Greg, I think is alluding to the system that's in play here, and how limiting it is, and how it's really become it was a good thing for its intended purpose, but here it's really become a barrier.
Yeah.
And so Jesus is really, I think, too, highlighting that fact.
Yeah, in our Methodist tradition, John Wesley, who was famous for his field preaching outside, 30 years after his death, the Methodists in Britain had outlawed field preaching. It was no longer legal to preach in the fields because they were and it's this whole notion that systems get turned in all kinds of different directions, and sometimes it becomes more lawful to do poorly or bad than it is to do good.
Because I think it was number 39 that said that, which is what objected to this person here, that you can't work on the Sabbath. The law doesn't allow you to carry that sleeping mat here. I think it was number 39.
That's real.
So they were all very numbered, and they were very conscious of those numbers and not to break them.
One of the things I did for the passage, and again it's towards the end of that, was to imagine the times when the waters were stirred in my life. Mysteriously, surprisingly, suddenly. And I remember particularly at an early part of my ministry, sort of downcast and downhearted for a particularly long season. And all of a sudden, in a very surprising morning study by myself, relief came. And release happened. And all of a sudden, in, again, very mysterious ways, felt like God was encouraging me along, going the next mile, taking it. And it's happened at other times and places. That time just stands out to me as I think about this passage.
Yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that, because that's a powerful image, that stirring, and how that is part of healing. That for the folks that were seeking that was important.
One of the things we do is invite our guests to share a book that's inspiring with you. Have you got a book you want to tell us a little bit about?
A little bit. You just mentioned about a time in your life that you know, a little downcast, a little discouraged, and there was a stirring in your heart, and felt that was encouragement from God. I think there's a lot of us out there, Greg, who we do get discouraged, we do become downcast. And I really think one of the avenues that God has chosen is through relationships. And I think a lot of times that our relationships to other people becomes the vehicle that will be their means of their hearts being stirred and seeing a glimmer of hope in their life. Because when whatever's going on in your life, wherever you have been wounded, wherever you need healing, I really think a vehicle God has chosen is through another relationship. And this book is really Lost in America by Tom Clegg and Warren Bird. Have either of you read this one? This book is an excellent book. It really identifies these fresh ways and practical ways that we can build relationships with people and really become that glimmer of hope, that vehicle that brings them this possibility of hope. And I really think that there's a lot of people out there who need that. And I think by building a relationship with them, a little caption here under the title is Lost in America, How You and Your Church Can Impact the World Next Door. We think about, and I think churches, denominations, church affiliations, we need to sponsor foreign missions. Very important, very vital ministries. But we also need to not overlook or even neglect the possibilities of the opportunities that are right next door, because there's a lot of opportunities there. And if you're really looking for inspiration and encouragement to do that, I would highly recommend Lost in America. We'll give you some real fresh ideas, practical ideas that will really encourage you and actually motivate you to look at those possibilities. I think I've read this book now at least 3 times. And every time it's just as fresh as the first time.
Marvelous. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Greg. Thank you for joining us with Reflections. Join us next time.
Shalom.